Greetings, and welcome to my channel. I'm the Anunnaki Theorist. Today I'm going to do my final installment in my maze series. In my last videos, I did the definition of the maze, I did the kingship, and I did the priesthood and religion. The next group of maze would be, well, pretty much about as important as the other two when it comes to creating a civilization. And when I said that the maze were essentially technical manuals, when we think technical manual nowadays, we are talking about some form of a trade. Although they didn't classify them as trades, they classified them as crafts. So, we have these that we know for a fact. But I'm going to take a page out of Mr. Sitchin's book, and not one of his literal books. I'm going to take some liberties. Along with the ones that we have here, we can pretty much assume that there would be some form of textile, technical manual, some way teaching, weaving cloth and tailor or seamstress or some form of, clothier, somebody that makes clothes. You would think that would be there. I mean, you've got leather worker, you got basket weaver. So, yeah, I would think that they would have some form of a clothier. Now, when we look at the depictions, or the statues, or the carvings, I have to stop here for a minute. This is something that hurts me badly. We have the photographic records of the statues and the depictions and the carvings, but unfortunately, we don't have the actual statues and carvings, at least not complete anymore. When this report originally came out, that ISIS was going around and destroying what they said was the remains of their pagan past, I wept. I bawled like a baby. Regardless of whether this is depicting the Anunnaki or not, this is our cultural heritage. This is where we came from. Mr. Graham Hancock, he calls us a species of amnesiacs. ISIS wasn't the first one to do this kind of thing. In previous videos, I talked about how we have roughly 1,000 years worth of scientific repression. Because any time the reigning religion or culture or belief system goes in and tries to convert another culture that has their own beliefs and their own religions and their own histories, either prior to the conversion or after the conversion, they wind up destroying the cultural artifacts and the texts Now, it's said that when the missionaries, when they went to Mesoamerica and they started converting the tribal peoples there. And of course, these weren't really tribal peoples. We know they weren't. They had massive cities that probably rivaled anything in England. But we have the Popol Vuh. A surviving little bit of that ancient history. And then we have some other texts, because it's said that they don't actually destroy everything. Some things are archived. And if that's the case, if they really do have this archive of these ancient cultures, I mean, we're all adults now. We've grown up at least a little bit. We're still not quite there. But these things need to be released. People need to know what our lives, our ancestors' lives were like. Okay, I'm going to climb down off my soapbox on that one. Let's get back to the maze. When we look at the images of these ancient beings, these gods, the Anunnaki, they appear to be what's, for lack of a better term, scantily clad. Now, I am eventually going to go into some speculation as to what the conditions of Nibiru are like. What they're like now, what they were like back then, so on and so forth. Okay, but we can kind of assume that since Nibiru isn't close to the sun very often, and the only thing that keeps it warm enough for life, is the core. So we'd have to assume that it's kind of cold there. It's not an ice world, but it's kind of cold. So, you know, looking at the Fahrenheit scale, upper 30s, lower 40s, pretty much all year round. And that's their year. Okay. So when they were on Nibiru, and then of course when they first came here, they were probably in full bodysuits, not exposing much skin and so on and so forth. But when they got here, they found out how warm it is. And I have to point out the verse in the Bible where it talks about when God was walking in the garden, and this God was Yahweh, and it said that he walked in the cool of the day. It's because that's when it was the most comfortable for him. Because even though when they first got here, Earth was still in an ice age, it was still warm compared to what they were used to. Okay, so they would have had maize that taught how to weave cloth and how to make clothing. And of course, they did this for themselves at first, and then they would have taught mankind. Okay, so the next thing that we get into, and this is kind of, it goes hand in hand with this. You get the basket weaver, okay, baskets to carry things and store things and so on and so forth. But when we get into the Lost Book of Enki, when Anu first arrived on Earth, okay, this was, Alelu was still, having a problem, was wanting to contest the whole idea of the throne, the kingship of Nibiru, and Anu was also wanting to nail down exactly who was going to do what, the major jobs, who was going to be in control of Nibiru, who was going to be in control of the Earth, who was going to be in control of the mines, so on and so forth. Okay, So, when Anu first arrived, it says, in the waters beside the marshlands, in his chariot splashed down. Ea, for the arrival, reed boats prepared for Anu to arrive by sailing. Okay, it says above the sky chambers were hovering, a royal welcome they were offering. Okay, here we have two vehicles. Okay, the sky chambers, yeah, that's their technology. That's something that they brought with them. But the thing is they're not going to bring everything that they need. So the reed boats, they would have consulted the maze and looked at the whole idea of the basket weaving, and that kind of can be put on a larger scale, and so they would have taken reeds and made boats. Now, in this region, there might not have been that many in the way of trees. I mean, we got to think, they were just coming out of an ice age, or Earth was just coming out of an ice age. So not a lot of things had time to grow. And then also, this is in a region, well, it's under the Persian Gulf right now. But prior to the deluge, this area would have been not underwater, which it's underwater now. Okay, so there would have been lots of reeds. Reeds are highly sustainable. Now, here's one of the things that we have to look at. A lot of cultures, tribal cultures, what we would classify as Indian or Native American, Aboriginal, they talk about being in harmony with nature. We are not in harmony with nature. We kind of rape nature. Now, one of the things that some people ask when it comes to the idea of the Anunnaki, when it comes to extraterrestrials at all, where is their technology? Well, the one thing that I always point out is we wouldn't know their technology if it was staring us in the face. Now, this is Michael Tellinger, okay? I've talked about him in the past a little bit, okay? He's primarily known for the Ubuntu movement. Now, a lot of people would have a problem with this because this is actually kind of Marxist. This is trying to get away from a cashless or a cash-based society to make it a cashless society, to basically make it to where it's communal living. This is essentially Marxism or communism. Okay, but a lot of the other things that he goes into is he goes into the ancients, and gets into ancient technology. Now you see these things right here. These. Now, mainstream academia says that these are nothing more than cattle corrals. The problem with that, though, is if these were some way to, keep animals herded together, either they had an opening and then they sealed it up after they put the animals in, or they made the animals jump over these walls to get them in. Because here's the walls. Now, these things are made out of a stone called hornsfeld. Hornsfeld has this interesting property. If you hit it with another stone or a hammer, it rings like a bell. Now, what would happen if you hit all of those stones simultaneously? One of the ideas that Tellinger proposes, since this is in Africa, And Africa was where a lot of the gold mines were. This was almost like a levitation platform. They would actually put the gold in the middle of these corrals, and then they had some way of activating all these stones at once, and it created a levitation effect that sent the gold up. Now, is that the case? We don't know. But we do know that sound can levitate things. There are a lot of videos, there are a lot of documentaries, there are a lot of things out there. If that interests you, just look up sound levitation and you will find that. But what I'm getting at is, instead of extracting whatever it is that causes this stone to do what it does, they used it in its natural state. And this is the reason why I said we wouldn't know their technology, because our technology requires us to extract minerals and metals out of the stone, out of the ground, and then to refine it, to process it, and to mold it. That is where we're not in harmony with nature. Now, they did bring some things with them. There were some tools, there were some technologies, but they pretty much took all those, because there wasn't very many. They took those back with them when they left. But the whole idea of utilizing the land and the resources of the land that you come to, this is something that we are going to be using when we go to Mars. Now, the robots that this video talks about are not in existence yet. This is a proposal. But when we go to colonize Mars, there is one gigantic issue, and that is the cosmic rays. There's not much of an atmosphere on Mars. So the colonists will constantly be bombarded by radioactive cosmic rays. And this isn't going to help their health. So the proposal is to create this, well, I see it as a gigantic pavilion made out of the stuff, the ground of Mars. Now, these robots are supposed to take the stuff, the ground of Mars, the dirt, and mix it with water that it extracts from the polar ice and create some form of a concrete. And they're going to build this 3D printing. They're going to build this pavilion, and then the habitats, which there are a lot of them out there right now that are being looked at as proposed habitats for the Mars missions. They will actually be put inside this to help protect from cosmic rays. Now, Mars is a completely and totally inhospitable planet. Not a whole lot in the way of resources. But when the Anunnaki came to Earth, Earth was perfect. The only thing that they had a problem with, and I'm going to get into this here in just a minute, is it was too bright, it was too warm, the gravity was too high, the gravity wasn't high enough. Let's get that straight. The gravity wasn't high enough, the pressure wasn't high enough. And it even said they could feel the Earth spin because the time was so fast. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so we got into for all that. We got builder, basket weaver, so on and so forth. So the next thing I want to get into, and it kind of goes in with agriculture. Now, we don't have that May either. We don't have the May for agriculture, but I'm quite sure that it was there. And one of the things that Zecharia Sitchin tells us is that there are 3 things that are not native to Earth that were key to allowing human civilization to rise and thrive. Okay, so the first one is a grain. Now, it's not your normal grain. It's not wheat. It's not barley or rye or anything. It is a specific grain, and supposedly it has gone extinct, or it's going extinct, in the Iraqi region where Sumer used to be. The scholars say that it used to grow wild, and this is the reason why the hunter-gatherers were able to come together. This is their explanation of how Sumer rose. They were actually able to come together, and because this grain grew naturally, they didn't have to cultivate it, and they didn't have to plant it or anything like that. It was already there, and they could make bread from it, and more importantly, they could make beer from it. And so that's the reason why that Sumer was able to rise. That's mainstream's explanation. But it's that grain is what is supposed to have been brought from Nibiru and planted on Earth. And, to make the beer, that was, like I said, that is incredibly important. You got to have that beer. One of the other things that was supposedly brought. Now, I used to think that it was grapes, but I don't think so. I think grapes are native. Because you got to think, if you've ever, looked at a vineyard, if you've ever, seen grapes in their natural state, and the vine that they're on, there's a lot of green there. So there's a lot of chlorophyll. The thing we have to understand about any plants brought from Nibiru, they're not going to have chlorophyll. They're not going to be green. Because the way a plant here on Earth makes its food is it takes sunlight and carbon dioxide, and with the help of the chlorophyll, creates sucrose, creates its food source. Okay? But anything that comes from Nibiru, because they don't have the sun, they're not going to be green. So, it says, from the pouch a bag of seeds she brought out, seeds in the soil to be sown. A host of bushes from the seeds shall sprout, a juicy fruit they will produce. The juice and elixir shall form, for drinking by the heroes it shall be good. Okay, it says, their ailments it will chase away, happier the mood it shall make. Okay, not only would this have been an intoxicant, but the Anunnaki, they were suffering from, well, essentially motion sickness. Like I said, some of them said that they could actually feel the earth move. They could feel it spin. So because of all the forces that they were being, subjected to here on Earth, they weren't used to, and it was making them sick. This is where we get the idea of the Greek drink known as ambrosia. Now, the primitive Greeks, they didn't understand what ambrosia actually was. They thought it was strictly an intoxicant, and if you drank it, you gained, god powers or something like that, okay? But the ambrosia was actually a calmative. It was something to help the Anunnaki eliminate the symptoms of their adjustment to Earth's forces. Okay, so we have grain, and we have some sort of a berry. Now, the other thing is sheep. Sheep, according to the ancient texts, are not native to Earth. And I can show you this. This is a parable. They're debating basically who's better. Is grain more important or is sheep more important? But down here in 3742, at that time Enki spoke to Enlil, Father Enlil, now sheep and grain have been created on the holy mound. Okay, holy mound, I've talked about this before. It could either be like, a mountain similar to like Mount Olympus or something like that, but it also means heaven. Let us send them down from the holy mountain. Enki and Enlil, having spoken their holy word, sent sheep and grain down from the holy mound. Sheep and grain, not native to Earth. Well, not just any grain. Again, like I said, it's a specific grain, but not native to Earth. There is no taboo in any religion on eating sheep, lamb, mutton. You've got the Hindus. They won't eat beef. The cow is sacred. You've got the Jews. They won't eat anything unclean. Shellfish, pork. But nobody has a taboo against sheep. The sheep were brought originally because this was the favorite food of the gods. Now, my old Facebook page is gone, but I had done a post on it to where I had an epiphany. I was like, not trying to offend anybody. This is stereotypically speaking. But stereotypically speaking, the Anunnaki gods were rednecks. And there's three main reasons why, and I showed them. The first one was they liked NASCAR. Of course, they weren't cars. They were chariot races. Their preferred spouse was a relative. Again, I'm not trying to insult anybody. This is stereotypically speaking. And the final thing is they loved their barbecues. Burnt offerings were originally barbecues. They weren't completely burnt up. They were cooked just right. And the preferred, quote-unquote, sacrifice was usually sheep, because this was their favorite meat. Now, the reason why it became a burnt sacrifice is this was after the gods left. There was no one to come and take the perfectly cooked meat. So they let it burn up, and they believed that it was the smoke and the aroma is what pleased the gods. In fact, it even says that in the Bible. When Noah finally, rested the ark, well, the ark came to rest on Mount Ararat, and he came down and he created a altar and he made a burnt sacrifice. It was the aroma of the smoke that brought God's attention. Even Zechariah Sitchin says that this is the reason why the Anunnaki knew that there was still somebody alive, because they thought everybody was supposed to be dead. The Anunnaki females, they wept because they watched as people died under these mountains of water. But it was the whole idea of the smoke wafting up that's what brought their attention, because it smelled so wonderful. But it's sheep. Now this will be in the description, as most everything that I always put in. And this is a good parable. Again, like I said, it's the debate between which is better. Of course, the moral of the story is whichever one that actually venerates the gods most. Because down here it says, dispute spoken between sheep and grain. Sheep is left behind and grain comes forward. Praise be to the Father Enki. Okay. So there's all those. I got one more thing that I'm going to talk about when it comes to the craft maze. We get into metalworking and the smith. Now, the maze would have been taught to humans in the Anunnaki cities, but not necessarily to those humans that went outside the cities. They were kind of booted out and told, hey, go do your own thing. But when we get into the Bible, and we get into the book of Enoch, we hear about the Watchers, the fallen ones, the Igigi. And it says that these were the ones that taught mankind technology. Now, they didn't bring the maze with them. They already studied the maze. They were the masters. They were the master metalsmiths, the master weaponsmiths, the master armor smiths. And they took some humans as apprentices. This was the first master-apprentice situation. So it wouldn't have been from the actual technical manuals themselves. It would have been from these Igigi. Okay, I said that was going to be the last one, but I do have one final one. Okay, we have the builder. Okay, we also have the stonemason. I talked about this in an earlier video. A relative few humans were taken aside and they were taught to make brick and taught to build with brick. And that would have been something that they would have pulled from the maze. Not to say that the Anunnaki themselves didn't already know how to do it, but by having the technical manuals makes it easier for them to teach humanity. And that's basically what the technical manuals would have been for. But that's the maze. The most important ones, the ones that helped create our civilization. Whether they were taught within the Anunnaki cities, or if maybe, a scribe, and this is one thing that we do know. Anu tasked Nengashita, this is Thoth, tasked him with teaching humanity how to survive, how to become civilized, and how to thrive, because they were going to leave. Now, I don't want to denigrate human ingenuity in any way, shape, or form. This would not have been taught to everyone on the planet. This would have only been taught to a few. So you have all the other species, the hominids, that were eventually weeded out in some way, shape, or form, or in the case of the Neanderthal, where we find their DNA in Homo sapien. Well, Homo sapien sapien. So they weren't weeded out, they weren't destroyed, they were actually merged with the Homo sapien. But you have all the other hominids, and they themselves could have come up with these things that were taught in the maze. So, like I said, I'm not trying to say that humans couldn't have done it. But one of the things that we have seen, that, well, it has been calculated. If we look at the idea that humanity was engineered, we were evolved prematurely, if we would have been allowed to evolve naturally, the level of our technology right now would roughly be early Iron Age. That would be it. But because the maze were used and given to certain individuals of early man, we were able to evolve, not physically, I'm talking culturally, technologically, we were able to evolve faster. And now look at us. We're going to space. We might be getting ready to meet them either out there or, well, honestly, I think it's going to be sooner that they're going to meet us here. But without the maze, without these technical guides, we wouldn't be where we're at today. I'm the Anunnaki Theorist. Enjoy.